Let's say you're experiencing a MAC flooding attack. What is that? Well, a MAC flooding attack occurs when a device is bombarding your switch with a whole bunch of MAC addresses. Now, why would you do that? Or why would anybody want to do that? Well, if they can bombard your switch with a whole bunch of bogus MAC addresses, then they can fill up the MAC address table on the switch. And by doing so, they essentially turn your switch into a hub, whereby any frames that now arrive at the switch, that the switch does not know where to send the frame to because it doesn't have entries in the MAC address table for destination MAC addresses that are legitimate, then it's just going to flood them out all ports except the port they came in on. So now the malicious user is going to receive a lot of that traffic, and if they're using packet capturing software, they can now analyze those frames that are being flooded out all ports except the port they arrived on. So essentially that malicious user is just trying to gather information and hopefully find the diamond in the rough, that one piece of information that's going to help elevate their privileges and attack the network further at a later point in time. But you have port security configured, and you're still experiencing the MAC flooding attack. Why is that happening? Well, it might be because even though you configured port security, you forgot to enable it on the interface. That's what happened. So even though the configuration was totally done by you, you forgot to enable it. And to enable port security on an interface, you type in switch port security. Let's examine an issue whereby we configured port security, but we forgot to enable it on the interface. On ASW1, we're going to analyze PC1's interface, which is fast Ethernet 0/1. So let's look at our MAC address table. Show MAC address table, and we'll say dynamic. Let's look for 06D6. Here it is, right there. So VLAN 10 06D6 fast Ethernet 0/1. It's being learned on that particular interface. Now let's say we are experiencing a MAC flooding attack. So this entire MAC address table is just being filled up with bogus MAC address entries, meaning they're not legitimate. They're not MAC addresses within our environment. Even though I have port security configured on this interface, and how can I verify that? Well, we can type in show port security. It's not listed there, is it? It's not listed at all. So let's see. Show port security, interface, fast Ethernet 0/1. It says port security is disabled. It says port status is secured down. Violation mode is restrict. Well, the violation mode of restrict is not the default. The default is shutdown. It's shutdown. So we have configured something in relation to port security because this value is not the default. Let's look at the output of show port security address. And this allows us to see the dynamically learned or statically configured or sticky learned addresses. And we do have PC1's MAC address configured here as a secure MAC address on port fast Ethernet 0/1. So let's analyze the output of show run interface fast Ethernet 0/1. And we'll see here switch port security maximum 2. Switch port security violation restrict. Switch port security MAC address 06D6. What are we missing? We are missing the command switch port security. So we'll type in configure terminal, interface fast Ethernet 0/1, switch port security. This enables port security on the interface. So now let's look back at our commands. Show port security. Now we see fast Ethernet 0/1 listed. So if you configure port security, but if you forget to enable it, the port's not going to show up in the output of show port security. We can see maximum number of MAC addresses 2. The current number of MAC addresses is 2. And the security action is to restrict. If we analyze further, show port security address, we can see that we have 2 addresses learned now. So we have the statically configured one of 06D6 for PC1, and this other one is another device, for example, an IP phone or a virtual machine as an example, that is also running on PC1. So we have two MAC addresses learned on this particular interface. One of them was just dynamically learned, and then PC1's is specifically statically configured in our case. So we can see the difference in the type when it's put into this address table. And now if we examine the output of show port security fast Ethernet 0/1, interface fast Ethernet 0/1, we'll see from this output that now port security is enabled. We are secure up, whereas before we were what? Let's go back up and check that out. We were secure down. That's what we were, secure down. Scroll back down here. Our violation mode still restrict. Maximum 2. We have 2. One of those addresses is a statically configured address. So then the last source address we can see down here came from this particular MAC address on VLAN 10. So it's important to remember that port security must be enabled with the switch port security command.